Hello, my name is Lauren and welcome to the Theoretical YouTube channel, where we haven't actually made a Harry Potter video in over 3 years. But that doesn't mean I haven't been thinking about it. A few months ago, my siblings and I were watching a Harry Potter movie marathon on cable TV, because apparently we spent New Year's Eve in 2014, and we were talking about all of the magical comas that Hermione gets in. Namely the petrification, the lake snooze, and the purple fire incident. Which of course led us to the question of who actually spent the most time injured throughout the books. Which one of Harry's classmates suffered the worst as a result of going to school with the Chosen One? Who cost Hogwarts the most in liability insurance? And as it turns out, through a painstaking amount of research and piecing together a complete timeline of the entire series, there is an answer to this question. So come along, bring your essence of Dittany, pack a Bezoar, and maybe a Mandrake root or two just to be safe. Because today, we find out who spent the most time in the Hogwarts hospital wing. Alright, so let's just start at the beginning of the books, which means that the very first injury of the entire series unsurprisingly belongs to Neville Longbottom, who splashed a boil potion on himself in their first potion lesson.
Why is it always me?
He went up to the hospital wing on the first Friday of term. He next appears on page at the flying lesson the next Tuesday, but we can reasonably assume that he only spent 1 day in the hospital wing. Of course, Neville also breaks his wrist at the same flying lesson and is sent right back upstairs. This is the same day as the midnight duel, which Draco challenges Harry to because of the Remembrall incident, which means it's the same night that they trip over Neville on their way out of the Gryffindor Tower, meaning that the broken wrist only took 1 day to fix. The next injury of the year is when Ron is bitten by Norbert the Dragon. Ron is bitten on a Wednesday, but doesn't go in until the next afternoon when it's clear that the wound has become infected. The exchange where they give Norbert to Charlie Weasley happens the next Saturday, which Ron is still unavailable for, but he is seen talking to Harry outside of the hospital wing the next day, which means that he spent a total of about 3 days. Then Harry spends time in the hospital wing after defeating Voldemort and retrieving the Sorcerer's Stone. Philosopher's Stone? Blah, blah, blah. Dumbledore tells him that he has been unconscious for 3 days, and then Madame Pomfrey makes him stay another night after he wakes up. But he is allowed to attend the end of the year feast the next day, so a total of 4 days wing time. Despite also being injured in the chess match, Ron does not spend any hospital time here. Draco also gets punched in the face in this book by Ron, but doesn't spend any wing time for this minor injury. So, moving on to Chamber of Secrets, this is where things get really complicated. First of all, Ron is injured by the Whomping Willow, and McGonagall suggests that he go upstairs, but he refuses, so no wing time. Then, during the Gryffindor-Slytherin Quidditch match, Harry's arm is broken by the rogue bludger, and then Lockhart accidentally removes all of his bones. Harry regrows all 33 bones in his arm overnight, therefore only getting 1 day. However, on the same night, Colin Creevey is petrified by the basilisk and his body is brought up to the hospital wing. Quidditch matches are always on Saturdays, and the next day Hermione says that the Polyjuice potion is still a month away from being complete because of the Lacewing Fly preparation time. They end up taking the Polyjuice potion on Christmas Day, or December 25th, 1992. So Colin is petrified on a Saturday in late November. We will come back to this. Justin Finch Fletchley is petrified the day after dueling club, which is 1 week after Hermione says there is still a fortnight to go until the Polyjuice potion is complete. So 1 week before Christmas, meaning that Justin goes up to the hospital wing in mid-December. Of course, the Polyjuice potion itself does not go well for Hermione, who ends up catified and spends several weeks with Madame Pomfrey. She went in on Christmas Day and came out on the first day of February, so about 5 weeks total in the hospital wing. Then she and Penelope Clearwater are both petrified on the same day, which was the day of the Gryffindor Hufflepuff Quidditch match.
We can't cancel Quidditch.
This match was supposed to be held on the last Saturday before their Easter break began. Easter 1993 was on April 11th, meaning that Hermione and Penelope both go into the hospital wing in mid-April. Then, Everything in this book's finale takes place on the same day. Both the mandrakes being ready and Ginny's rescue from the Chamber of Secrets happens on May 29th. We know this because the mandrakes are ready 3 days before exams, and McGonagall says that exams will start on June 1st. Therefore, we can determine how long each victim was petrified. Colin for about 5 months or 187 days, Justin for 165 days, and both Penelope and Hermione for about 42 days. And remember the catified weeks too, so Hermione actually spends about 77 days total. And after everyone wakes up, Ginny is sent to the hospital wing for 1 night, and Lockhart is also sent there for his memory loss. Now, obviously, Lockhart's memory loss continues to affect him for the rest of his life, which he spends out in the St. Mungo's Hospital, like we see in Book 5. So technically, he does spend the most hospital time of any character in the series, but he was only in the Hogwarts Hospital wing for 1 day. Now, Prisoner of Azkaban has 100% less petrifications and 100% more hippogriff attacks. Draco provokes Buckbeak on the first day of classes, which was the first Monday of term, and is next seen in class on the following Thursday. So he spent a maximum of 4 days, and was probably only injured for 1 of them. Harry doesn't go after his encounter with the trained Dementors, but does end up in the hospital wing after his encounter with the Quidditch Dementors. Madame Pomfrey makes him stay the whole weekend, and since Quidditch games are always on Saturdays, we can assume this means 2 days total. Then a random 4th year Gryffindor and 6th year Slytherin have a fight that results in them both growing leaks out of their ears. I estimate 1 day of wing time each. And then there's the whole werewolf Sirius Dementors night, which feels like it takes a long time because of the time travel, but it's actually only 1 day. Both Harry and Hermione stay the night after their encounter with the Lake Dementors, and Ron stays the same amount of time for his broken leg. Does not seem fair. Which brings us to Goblet of Fire, the year of terrible haircuts and a mobile hospital wing. Because Madame Pomfrey is on site for the Triwizard Tournament, the characters who are injured in the most dangerous parts of the story don't actually receive any wing time. That includes Harry and Cedric for the first task, and Harry, Ron, Hermione, Cedric, Victor, Cho, Fleur, and Gabrielle for the second task. However, we do have some other data, like that Eloise Midgen is said to have spent some amount of time for trying to blast her acne off, and Fred, George, Fawcett, and Summers are all de-aged in the hospital wing after they tried to cross Dumbledore's age line by dubious measures. Goyle is sent upstairs after his face becomes fungus in the Harry Draco fight, which is the same fight when Hermione's teeth grow uncontrollably. Both she and Goyle probably only spent 1 day. Hermione also receives hate mail containing undiluted blubberpus and spends 1 day getting her burns treated, since we do see her in class that afternoon. Then, at the end of the book, Harry spends 1 night in the hospital wing after facing Voldemort, drugged into blissful oblivion, and the real Alistair Moody spends about 3 days after being freed from his year-long capture. We assume this timeline because he does attend to the end of the year feast, which Harry says takes place a few days after Voldemort's return. Okay, now we're up to Order of the Phoenix and lots more complicated timelines. Particularly, the Gryffindor Quidditch team gets hit pretty hard this year for a variety of different reasons. Katie Bell accidentally eats a blister pod from Fred and George. Alicia Spinette has a jinx put on her that causes unstoppable hair growth. And Jack Slopper was hit with his own beater bat. But you should see the other guys, because on the Slytherin Quidditch team, Warrington is sent up with a horrible skin condition. And Montague is shoved in a vanishing cabinet by Fred and George and found in a toilet the day after they set off the fireworks to irk Umbridge. This was right before Easter break. Montague is still in the hospital wing when Harry is looking for Professor McGonagall on the day of his history owl, which Hermione says are 6 weeks after the firework incident, meaning that Montague spent at least 42 days in the hospital wing. Non-Quidditch related injuries include Marietta Edgecombe, who spent some hospital wing time trying to get the word sneak removed from her forehead. Marietta went in on the same night that Umbridge busted Dumbledore's army, which was during a Patronus lesson, which was the last DA meeting before Easter break, and also a Friday. Easter in 1996 was on April 7th. By the time Harry has a conversation about her with Cho 2 days later, after the fireworks incident but before his occlumency lesson with Snape, she's still in. So Marietta spends at least 2 days in there for her sneak acne. Then you have McGonagall herself, who took 4 stun spells to the chest trying to defend Hagrid on the day of Harry's astronomy owl. This is also the night before his history owl, which is when he has the vision of Sirius in the Department of Mysteries. In a Daily Prophet article, it says that Voldemort returned to the Ministry on a Friday, meaning that Harry's history owl was also on a Friday the first week of June, meaning that his astronomy owl the night before was a Thursday. Now, McGonagall actually doesn't stay in the Hogwarts hospital wing. She's transferred out to St. Mungo's for the rest of her recovery because Harry can't find her that afternoon, and she returns to the school the next Sunday. So McGonagall spent 1 day in the hospital wing and 3 days in any hospital. Then there's all of the Department of Mystery injuries, where students did recover in the hospital wing. Harry and Luna have no serious injuries, and Ginny and Neville only spend 1 day each. But Ron and Hermione have the worst of it from the brains and the purple fire incident, each going in on a Friday and coming out 3 days before the end of term. Harry has said it's been a week since Sirius died when he's on the train home, meaning that Ron and Hermione each probably spent about 4 days. Umbridge also goes into the wing on the same Friday and leaves on the last day of term, so about 6 days total. And that brings us all the way up to Half-Blood Prince. First of all, Cormac McLagan says that he missed Quidditch trials last year because he ate a pound of doxy eggs on a dare. Bad idea. Just 1 day, though. Then we get one of the more interesting cases. Katie Bell touching the cursed necklace in Hogsmeade, which she did on the term's first trip in mid-October. However, Katie is almost immediately transferred to St. Mungo's for her recovery, therefore only spending 1 day in the Hogwarts hospital wing. But in case you're curious, we do know that she returns to Hogwarts the day before Harry uses his Felix Felicis potion, aka Aragog Funeral Day, aka the same day that the 6th years have their apparition test, which was exactly April 21st. Therefore, Katie spends 26 weeks in the hospital, which is about 187 days. Katie's friend Leanna also spends 1 day upstairs for shock. Back to Pomfrey's care, though. Ron is also the victim of one of Draco's assassination attempts when he's poisoned in Slughorn's office. He went in on his 17th birthday, which is March 1st, 1997. This was a Saturday. And he was still hospitalized during the Gryffindor Hufflepuff Quidditch match the next week, also a Saturday. He then left the following Monday, therefore 9 days total. In that Quidditch game, Harry gets a cracked skull from a bludger and ends up next to Ron. Madame Pomfrey insists on keeping him overnight, and he's released the same day as Ron with a 2-day total. Malfoy ends up in the hospital wing after Harry uses Sectum Sempra on him. It's unspecified how long he stays there, but I think it's likely no more than a day. And then there's the battle at the end of the book. Since Dumbledore straight up dies and the rest of the main cast are all under the effects of Lucky Potion, there are only 2 hospitalizations. The first is Bill Weasley, who was attacked by Fenrir Greyback in non-werewolf form, and the second is Neville Longbottom. The date of the battle is never actually specified, but we do know that it is after June 1st, but before exams, since they're cancelled because of Dumbledore's death. So this was likely the first week of June. Neville was released before Bill, I estimate 1 week, maybe 7 days. And Bill does attend Dumbledore's funeral, which is also on an unspecified date. But we do know the Hogwarts Express leaves the next day. And in Deathly Hallows, Minister Rufus Scrimgeour comes to the Burrow in order to read Dumbledore's will to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. This happens on Harry's 17th birthday, or July 31st, 1997. This is when Hermione points out that the Ministry's right to hold onto the willed possessions expired after 31 days. This is when Hermione points out that the Ministry's right to hold onto the willed possessions expired after 31 days. This is impossible if she means 31 days after Dumbledore's death, because he died before exams, and exams have never been more than 1 week into June. But if it means 31 days after the day of his funeral, that would put Dumbledore's funeral on about June 30th, 1997. This is corroborated by the fact that Harry says Dumbledore died over a month ago. All of which is to say that Bill likely spent no more than 3 weeks or about 21 days in the Hogwarts hospital wing. And despite many people dying on school grounds and an infirmary being set up in the Great Hall for the battle, no one uses the hospital wing in Deathly Hallows. The only time that Madame Pomfrey is even mentioned, she's tending to some of the injured in that makeshift infirmary downstairs. So, therefore we have all our data, and I have a few caveats for answering this question. Because who spent the most time in the Hogwarts hospital wing? Obviously, it was Madame Pomfrey. She works there. Who spent the most time injured in the hospital wing? That was Colin Creevey with about 187 days during his petrification of his first year. However, if you count St. Mungo's too, then Lockhart spends the rest of his life in a hospital, and Katie Bell actually ties Colin Creevey exactly with 187 days. However, I truly believe that if J.K. Rowling had created St. Mungo's earlier on in the series, then it makes no sense to have not transferred the petrified students there. If that piece of world building had already been in place, then surely the long-term patients would have been transferred much earlier. So not counting anyone's petrification time, the next winners are Hermione and Montague, tied with about 42 days each. And Hermione gets bonus points for having the most injuries overall. Yay! So there actually are a few ways to slice it, but Colin Creevey, Katie Bell, and Hermione Granger were all the most accident-prone students at Hogwarts. Good grief, that video took way too much math. I know it was basic arithmetic, but I did not expect to do so many calculations to figure out such a silly premise. Who am I, Kai? And why did so much revolve around Easter? Did you know that the date of Easter moves around because it's held on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox? Maddening. Anyway, if you liked this video, you can do so down below, and while you're down there, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a smattering of more Harry Potter content. And you can click the box here to see the time that I calculated who earned the most house points. Honestly, that answer shocked me more than this one. You can also follow us on Twitter at @theory_central or consider becoming a patron like the incredible David W., Alex DoQuinto, and Nicole in Oregon. All of whom I would never whack upside the head with a beater bat. Twice. But I believe that is every single thing I could possibly say about the Hogwarts Hospital wing. Except, geez, was it understaffed. So thanks for watching. I think I learned not to eat or drink anything mysterious in the wizarding world, and I'll see you later.
Fell over 100 feet.
Yeah, come on, Ron. Let's walk you off the astronomy tower.
And see what you look like.